Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command.
The Cardiac Commanders are the Clutch Commanders!
With former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Take Command coming your way alongside Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. Thank you for finding us. Subscribe, rate, review, do all that podcasty stuff. Help us to continue to grow this show. And thank you for checking us out, watching us, listening, however you're doing it. Logan, we got a lot of ground to cover today. We're going to project a 53-man roster and look at some of the really intriguing battles back end of the roster. But we've got to start with the big breaking news of Monday in the Commanders front office, where they got a deal struck with Terry McLaurin. The saga is over, and the most important player on Washington's offense has agreed to terms. He will be on the field against the Giants.
Yeah, I don't know if you can say that anymore, though, right? Like the now that Jaden Daniels is here and Laramie Tunsil, all these guys, and he's a piece of the system. And again, but also obviously very, very important. Ecstatic to have Terry back, and like it was funny. I was doing something. I was making a cut up today of Terry's like explosive plays from last year for the show, for the Command Center show. And I just was like, man, he does so much for the offense in terms of creating vertical stretch in the defense. So like get that piece back. That's going to create a little bit more space for Zach Ertz to operate underneath, more space for Deebo Samuel. The idea that Noah Brown is getting healthy heading into the season. Like it's just kind of all coming together in this like perfect way heading into 2025, which is a relief, quite honestly, because we talked about, there were some days at training camp where, the playmaking from the receiver position wasn't there. And I think Noah Brown's health and Terry signing obviously helps to resolve a lot of that.
Yeah, they just needed him. I mean, bottom line, you're right. He's not maybe the most important place. I always separate Jaden Daniels, I think, in this era, quarterback.
You kind of got to now,
yeah,
right? Like
exactly. Quarterbacks in this era are their own entity, even if you have a jag, frankly. But in this case, when you have an elite difference maker who's a top 5 guy in the league, maybe, and a perennial all-pro type who might be an MVP candidate this year, clearly Daniels is the bell cow. But yeah, I would take McLaurin maybe even over Tunsil. They got by and won 12 games last year with Brandon Coleman at left tackle in terms of import, just because of what he can provide and the difference. You're talking about the cut-ups. Look at some of the numbers last year. I put together a list of their biggest plays, and the top 5, all even more deeper than that, but were the longest plays from scrimmage last year were all catches by Terry McLaurin. This is a guy since 2020, 17 drops on 633 targets, a 2.7% drop rate. Only DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, and Amon-Ra St. Brown lower drop rates among receivers with 350 targets than Terry McLaurin. You know what you're getting. He's a steady customer, and if the ball's near him with his catch radius, doesn't matter if it's contested or not, he's coming down with it.
Yeah, the one thing there that I'd like to just kind of double click on is honestly like his ability to push the field vertically. Like, I've talked to other people around the league, and I think they have this vision of Terry as this contested catch guy. But really, I mean, last year specifically, he's become kind of a deep play merchant in a way that is akin to, he's not the same player, but akin to kind of a Tyreek Hill, this guy that really affects you vertically down the field. And when I was watching these vertical stems, obviously there's like 7 or 8 really explosive plays above 50 yards that he's able to cultivate. One's on a little RPO, a couple vertical down the field, but his ability to work that vertical kind of stem and indicator game. So what I mean by that is there's the great play, end of half, 10 seconds left on the clock against the New York Giants where he runs a fade, but he really works hard, gets up on Banks' toes, kind of sells the post with a little bit of a head fake. Banks opened his hips the wrong way, and he's able to catch that ball going down. There's another one where he's able to kind of work a release at the line of scrimmage, push vertical. He's always pretty good about holding the space from the sideline. So just how kind of crafty and masterful that was to watch, I thought was really interesting, because I've said this before. I think Terry's a really good player. I think I've always been on the fence about his route running nuance, but to watch those back to back, just like, this is such a valuable weapon for this offense. And again, like some of the stuff that Cliff does in terms of pre-snap side adjusts away from 3-by-1, it is perfect for Terry McLaurin. So I just think he's got a really nice niche in this offense. He's got kind of a superpower in terms of attacking the ball downfield. And as you know, Grant, like those explosive plays, they lead to points. And when you look at those metrics, it's like if you have a play above 25 yards on a drive, it's 55% chance you're going to score a touchdown. Like those plays are impactful for sure.
Yeah, the lens with which I view the league now, Logan, and we've talked about this a lot over the years, but it's just a chunk yardage league. And there's 5 or 6 plays in every single game that kind of make the difference. And there have always been stats that are viewed as predictors, and some of them are still the same. Like turnovers are always going to matter. But explosives, right? And just the ability to put defenses in a bind by picking up half of a football field at a time, or 40 plus yards with some of the stuff he can provide. If you don't have a guy in your offense that can do that, if you don't have someone that can strike up the band, you really are starting at a disadvantage. I look at some of the numbers from last year. Number 1 in the NFL with 24 contested catches, which he's led over the last 3 years. He had 10 touchdowns against single coverage. For a guy that people say, and you're right, like doesn't route people up necessarily or whatever, he beats single coverage because of his ability to make the contested catch as well as anybody. And I think what you just pointed out is a big reason why, going down the field, at the stem. And then, rating throwing to him last year, 135.3 was number 1 in the NFL. He and Jaden Daniels combined were the number 3 EPA per play for receiver quarterback tandems. When you have a rookie quarterback, like to provide him with Jaden Daniels is an absolute gift. This is an asset. He's going to make you right. And going into year 2, it was obvious they needed to give McLaurin to Daniels again, and they've wrapped him up and put him under the tree and delivered the goods here as we get ready for the start of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your explosive play point, one of the things that I remember vividly is looking at the Cincinnati Bengals offense when Joe Burrow got there, and I think they were 29th, 30th in the NFL. They draft Jamar Chase the next year, and the only discernible metric difference in the offense was the explosive play rate, and it went from 28th or 30th to 2nd or 3rd in the NFL, and they became the 2nd or 3rd best offense in the NFL, like in an offseason. And again, you talk about the potency of these explosive plays, the chemistry of the two players working together. And again, that's something that's really underrated. Terry does a great job, but some of these throws, it was really just a reminder of how good and efficient Jaden Daniels is at throwing this deep ball. His feel, his timing, his accuracy is really tremendous. And people say, deep balls are not a transferable skill. It's really hard to teach a quarterback how to do it. He's got a great feel for getting the right kind of ball loft, ball trajectory, this really high arc, and letting the receiver adjust to it subtly, and still has been very accurate. So in terms of metrics that I thought would regress, I thought that one would be one that would regress because, again, that's so hard to throw that ball so accurately. It's so hard to win that coverage. But after watching that cut up, I'm like, if they're going to provide this coverage to Terry, this single coverage, he's going to find a way to beat it. And Cliff does such a good job of spacing the field to force that one-on-one matchup. Like, think about it. I'm sure you can visualize it if you're a Commanders fan. We've got back offset left. Terry's out wide to the left. We've got 3 receivers to the right. You have to, a lot of modern defenses will rotate coverage to the 3 receiver side. You're ensuring that one-on-one matchup, they'll lock that backside. And if they get any type of press or that guy's within 5 yards, Jane Daniels just throwing that going ball. And Terry, over the course of last season, did such a great job of maximizing it.
Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen, big news from the Commanders. Terry McLaurin, who over the last 6 football seasons is tied for the NFL lead in 1,000-yard campaigns with Hall of Famers to be. Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, and Justin Jefferson is going to be on the field for the Commanders against the Giants to start the year. We'll wait and see all the details of the contract, but I think fans care the most about the fact that it's over and it's done. And they don't care about the numbers and who was right and who was wrong and a meeting in the middle. I mean, he got a deal done, and now he's going to be at practice this week. That is what they care about. How about the timing of he and Jaden Daniels now trying to get on the same page over 13 days? Because I find myself, Logan, thinking about the fact that they were so good together last year, especially on some of the timing stuff you're talking about vertically down the field. Some of those throws against the Bengals as an example. Like, that's only possible.
Really tremendous, yeah.
I mean, it's so like bang, bang, back of the end zone, or like the deep shot down the field, if you remember, to set him up for, I want to say, Daniel's first touchdown pass ever to Trent Scott, which is a great trivia question answer. But like, people say, oh, well, Daniels didn't even throw a pass in the preseason, or Ertz didn't play in any of those games. But to me, it's about the hours and hours on the grass, the hundreds of reps, the probably 50, 60 balls that Deebo Samuel got thrown that Terry McLaurin didn't. You could say it's a blessing in disguise, right? Because Deebo got more work maybe, and they got on the same page. But How do they make up for that now in 13 days? And do you think that we'll be able to notice anything that looks different early this season? Because if not, then it kind of feels like we maybe that all the practice time and camp and mini camp isn't as important as it's made out to be.
I mean, obviously, it's important to the extent that it's important, and some guys need it less than others. I think back to my time in Atlanta with Julio and Matt Ryan, and Julio, when he would practice like an absolute maniac, but he didn't practice every day because he was later in his career kind of nursing some stuff. But him and Matt Ryan always seemed to have the connection, and I think when you look at Jaden and you look at Terry, like their professionalism is something that gives me such extreme confidence that they'll be able to kind of get right back in the swing of things. And I think it's also great that they have 13 days to work on it. They'll be able to stay after practice, throw the football around a little bit, talk about how they're seeing coverages. Like, I really thought this thing was going to go to the 12th hour and they'd be signing the contract the night before the game, night before the season opener against the Giants. And so for me, I'm like, we're on borrowed time now. And I've seen people, receivers and quarterbacks, develop a certain level of chemistry, especially people that are experienced, like Terry. And I'm going to put Jaden in this bucket too, because of, again, his level of professionalism and how he studies stuff. So I do think it's something that, again, will it be an issue? Maybe slightly, but I do trust these guys to figure it out very quickly. And I think Cliff's going to play a huge role in that too, of just kind of expediting that communication. Hey, maybe Terry's not in on every single play. Maybe he's in these packages of plays so we can focus on making sure our timing is really good in these moments also.
So I want to go back to the Cliff part of it, but as I'm still thinking about that Bengals play, just as an example, I looked up the number. So I remember that this is the throw of the year as far as I'm concerned.
This is tremendous.
The week 3 coming out party, McLaurin is streaking down the right side of the field, actually asked to kind of be moved right before the play from what Cliff said. And then Daniels gets hit in the face mask. That was the moment, by the way, when I thought, this dude is a real one. Yeah. Like, that's when I knew, okay, I don't need to see anything else, kind of. But that play,
well, and everybody else, right? I mean, that was that was such a play, right?
Dude, it was crazy. But that play, Logie, had a 10.3% chance, like improbable touchdown. It was the most improbable pitch and catch in the NFL in the next gen stats era, dating back to 2016 for a touchdown. And I bring that up not to nerd out as much as just to say, like, the inches that you need that make all the difference there. I mean, you try that play 50 times. It's like hitting a half-court shot or something. But it's only made possible by two guys that were exactly on the same page. And maybe they're just so special that they could walk out on the field and do it again right now. But, like, you got 13 days now to get there. It's like the rocket is taking off. The countdown clock is it feels like a scene from, like, Armageddon, where it's like, we have 9 days. The guy runs into the room with all the papers. One of my favorite movies ever. But they got 13 days to get to a point where it's 3rd and 13 and the game's on the line, and Jaden can drop back and find Terry in the back of the end zone for a 9% probability catch to win the game.
Yeah, and I know we're gushing about this play from Cincinnati, but I went back and watched that today, and I was literally floor on the ground, because when you go through it, you're just like, how did this ball get completed? Because Terry's actually running a hitch and go. And Jaden throws that ball before Terry even finishes the hitch part of the route. So he knew the area of the field to throw the football. He knew Terry could get there. He beat the blitz. It's an all-out. I mean, like, when you stack it up and you just watch it, it's such a unique play to watch. It's so rare. And I've watched a lot of football. I've played a lot of football. I have never seen a throw quite like that. Speaking to your point, we got to figure out what the play was in 2016 that trumped it. But it was just the timing, the anticipation by Jaden. And again, when you watch the go balls, I know Terry gets a lot of credit for it, but Jaden has such a good feel for throwing that ball. And he's got a guy at the other end that can maximize it for him now, which is something really exciting. And like you said, hopefully they can get that chemistry thing worked out before week 1.
All right, so put the OC hat on for me for a second here. So I want to go back to the Cliff part of this. How does he factor into possibly helping them get off to a fast start? It sounds like maybe you think you could put him on some type of pitch count where you say, hey, we're going to give you these looks. Let's get these mastered. We'll add to this next week and in the weeks to come. Do you think that is kind of viable, or do you think they just throw him out there as they normally would because he's got 2 weeks and he'll be ready?
This is always a fun game because I fancy myself a pretty smart football player, but Cliff Kingsbury has forgotten more football than I will ever know, right? So rudimentary Neanderthal Logan Paulsen, my first inclination is to say, hey, let's get him a package. We want him on these looks. We want him in these plays. That way I can specifically Jaden Daniels and I, we can work the chemistry here. We can talk specifically these looks, and then we can also monitor his conditioning. I'm sure Terry's in great shape, but there's something different about putting the pads on and running around, coming from a guy who did it for 10 years, right? Like as good a shape as you think you're in, it's always a little bit different when the pads are on. So we can kind of get him on a pitch count. We can be more selective about his opportunities. And again, one of his superpowers is creating vertical space. So even just having him out there creates a certain amount of gravity. And gravity is maybe the wrong word because gravity attracts stuff. It really is like he stretches coverages like you'd stretch a rubber band, right? And so having that vertical speed and this guy that can hurt you down the field creates tremendous throwing windows. Like you watch when he's out there versus Pittsburgh, versus Philadelphia in the Giants game, for example, you're able to hit these high crosses, these high corners, these outs right behind him. And Zach Ertz, Zacchaeus, Crowder were the beneficiaries of a lot of that. But I think that's something that is transferable even if he's not getting the football.
Did they have anybody who could have done that if he wasn't out there? Obviously not in the same way, but is part of it that's Terry McLaurin back of the football card, like a reverence for him? Or is it that he's doing it better than, I'm just saying, Jalen Lane or whoever might be running that love of the game route or whatever it is?
Well, I think it's more about the vertical speed he possesses.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one thing, like you look at the Miami Dolphins just as a point of comparison. They went out, they drafted all these fast guys. And when you watch their film with Waddle and Hill, the field feels so much bigger. The defense has to cover so much grass. And so as you expand vertically into the defense, the zones that guys have to match and master are now stretched. And so instead of having to cover 5 yards or 10 yards in terms of circumference, now it's 12 yards. And that extra 2 yards really makes it easier for a guy like Jaden Daniels to find those windows. So I think that's something that if I'm Cliff, maybe the timing's not exactly where I want it, but for week one, maybe it's, hey, this is the Debo, Zach Ertz, Jalen Lane underneath type of game. And then as he kind of gets his sea legs, we get more into saying, hey, now we can kind of maximize these opportunities, again, in these packages that we just discussed.
Outside of the obvious, which is Jaden Daniels, the biggest beneficiary of McLaurin providing that vertical threat is who?
I think probably Zach. And the only reason I say that is because Zach in training camp, he's an older guy now, but his ability to win versus man coverage, find the soft spot in zones, he's the guy that's going to be able to take, in my opinion, the most direct advantage of that widened space. I think Debo will benefit, obviously, but Zach, again, watching his utilization in training camp, thinking about how they utilize him, especially the second half of last year when he goes 24 in critical down and distances, red zone, like he was outstanding. Like that's the guy, right? If I'm going to manipulate, if I can stretch you vertically, he's the guy that can manipulate you underneath and find those matchups you want. So I'm heavy in on Zach Ertz this year anyway, but I think this just adds another element to what he can do.
All right, do you have a hat rack? I want you to put your OC hat on the hat rack. So Logan Kingsbury's done working for right now. Pick up the GM hat. Logan Peters is going to join us next. Burning roster questions on offense. We'll get to the defense eventually here on Take Command as well. We're going to go through some of the most interesting decisions to be made as Washington whittles down its roster to 53. We'll do that next on Take Command. Welcome back on Take Command. So as we talk to you right now, the Commanders are finalizing their roster. They're moving magnets around on the whiteboard. And I always say, Logan, having covered the league for the 4 years that I did on a daily basis and now been around training camp since I was 10 for literally 26 seasons, I hate the idea that we just talk about people losing their jobs and families moving and things in this very kind of business way, but this is part of it. And so I always like to just throw the caveat out there that as we have these discussions, this ain't fantasy football, folks. I mean, this is real deal Holyfield stuff. And, it's not a fun day around the league. I know you were a guy for many years who probably was waiting on the phone to ring.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you brought that up because it's just an important reminder. Again, I think back to my time here in 15 going into 16 when I got cut, and it's extremely disruptive because it's, my wife was pregnant with our second child. We didn't want to move to Chicago together because the OGB was here, like all that stuff. So It is tough. It is tough. And again, think about these guys. They've just poured out, months of their lives in order to be a part of this team. And I'll tell you, every day, every cut day, it still stings me a little bit to think about this, right? So again, we're not talking about this in kind of a flippant way. We're talking about this in a how you construct a roster and a performance way. But again, if I was a GM, this would definitely be the worst day of the season for sure, because you're basically ending a lot of people's dreams. I will say the one benefit I think of the new roster construction post COVID is you get those 17 guys on practice squad, which is it's great to see. Like last year, as an example, like Ben Nickel, was hurt in training camp, but they're able to keep him around, kind of redshirt him. And I think he actually played pretty good this preseason and kind of warranted that developmental year. I'm not saying he's making the 53 or anything, but that what is the great thing I think about this new structure is that don't have to say bye to quite as many NFL players, and you can develop some talent.
Another thing that I really like about the post-COVID practice squad, in addition to the fact that it's over twice as large, which means more jobs and more people staying in buildings, is you can now keep veterans on your practice squad, which during your era wasn't a thing. So if you had played in the league for an extended period of time, once you had accrued a couple seasons worth of activity, you were not eligible. And you see this in baseball where there's guys getting phased out of the sport at a certain age because everyone's going younger and cheaper, essentially. But this has really provided a huge opportunity for veterans that are meaningful in buildings. Like, you can still be an asset in a building on a practice squad. And I actually think it's been a really healthy thing for the National Football League. But let's get into the specifics of this roster here. I know you jotted down some of the tough decisions that you think Peters is going to have to make. I want to start up front with the offensive line. The number one question is always, how many do you keep, 9 or 10? And there's one particular fascinating debate that I think we could have about this O-line. But what did you decide in terms of a roster number there?
So I think I have Sam Cosmi going to PUP. And so obviously that affects the number of people you can keep. So 10 with Cosmi, but 9, I guess, total, which is nice because you get to kind of bump another guy up that you wouldn't necessarily get to keep. But depending on what they do there, that could affect this either way.
Do you think there's a chance I would be shocked if he's not on PUP at this point? I know they've kind of left open the possibility of week 1. Do you think I'm overstating that, or do you think there's a chance that he's not on PUP?
Again, I'm not a doctor, but in my other job, I do ACL rehabs, and I just know that the doctor will say you'll be back in 8 months, but that's back running at 8 months, and that's not playing football. And now that turn after 8 months can be pretty quick, but I just think, if you're close, like when I watch him on the side, like he's doing drills, he looks great, he's moving around awesome, but there's another acclimation phase once you start putting the shoulder pads on and start putting your hands on people to kind of get used to that, like relearning those positions. So again, I'm not a doctor, and I would defer to Dan, and he seems pretty confident it may happen. But just in my experience in my other profession, it just seems like, why not give it that extra month to make sure that everything's really solidified and you've given that exposure to the football stuff.
And I feel like with him, really in general, I could just say this as a blanket statement, but what's the rush here at the start of the season?
Right.
If you give him PUP and or short-term IR is really, I guess, what we're talking about. But, effectively we're talking about a month where you can redshirt him, and then he comes back at his own pace. And by early October, he's on the field playing at a Pro Bowl level again for the most important bulk of your season. Then I think everybody's in a good place there. And they have the depth now, Logan, that you can get by. It's not like you're desperate. Allegretti started for them all year at guard. If Wiley kicks inside because they think Connerly's ready at tackle, now you've got a guy who started at guard on a Super Bowl team. I mean, they've got good players.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with the offensive line compared to this year compared to last year is, I think that's a great point. You don't need to rush it, obviously. Wiley, Allegretti, having those people in depth positions is really fantastic, because think about it. Wiley played 4 of the 5 offensive line spots this offseason. Allegretti played 3 of them. It's such a nice Band-Aid to have guys with their level of experience in NFL and in the NFL and in high stakes games. And again, it just helps you cover up any kind of issue. Like Brandon Coleman didn't play in the Cincinnati preseason game, and he's penciled in as the starter, and you didn't even really feel his absence because of what Wiley and Allegretti and all those guys are able to do. Chris Paul had a great game, right? So again, I think it's having those 2 veteran guys. I think the maturation of Chris Paul seems to be also at the forefront of this offseason for me. Like, he has taken a huge step, in my opinion, going from a guy that was kind of this like your classic practice squad guy who always has flashes but never quite has figured it out, to a guy this offseason who I was like, man, he looks like an NFL starting offensive lineman, which is great. So now you really have 3 depth pieces, and then you couple that with guys like Trent Scott, who I think is an underrated piece in terms of his ability to play tackle and guard. So those are the guys that seem like locks to me. So Laramie, Brandon, Tyler Biotish, Andrew Wiley, Josh Connerly, Nick Allegretti, Chris Paul, and then I say Trent Scott. But then the ninth guy here would be probably George Fant, as that kind of swing tackle, topside swing tackle. And the only reason I say that is because I don't know if you bring in a guy like him with his level of experience in the 12th hour if you're not planning on keeping him around the building.
I think Fant, I wouldn't put him as a lock necessarily, but I'm with you. It feels like to me when you sign a guy with his resume, you have a plan for him. If not, you could have waited until after cutdown day, frankly, or something like that, to your point. So here's my follow-up then based on the guys you just said. The area where they'd be slightly thin is center if Nick Allegretti is your starting right guard for Cosme in week 1. But I was actually arguing with someone about this the other day, a buddy of mine who covers the team. Their point is, well, you don't start him. You have him as the backup center, and then you kick Wiley down to guard, and you just let Connerly go from play number 1. I can't get past the fact that last year, I know it's a different guy, different situation, but Coleman was rotating, if you remember, at left tackle, and they basically indoctrinated him slowly. And I wonder what you think is going to happen at right tackle. I mean, this is the toughest front they're going to play from a talent standpoint, maybe all season, right out of the gate. Like, hey, welcome to the NFL. That's Brian Burns. That's a world eater named Abdul Carter. That's maybe the best D tackle, not named Chris Jones in the league, and Dexter Lawrence. So do you just kind of throw Connerly out there? Or if you're going to rotate him with Wiley like they did at tackle on the other side last year, then you can start Allegretti at guard. How do you see that going?
Yeah, I don't really have a good feel for that, because I do think Connerly is progressing. I think when you watch him from preseason week 1, even the joint practice to preseason week 3, you see a different animal, right? You see a guy who's moving well. You see the athleticism. You start to see the understanding of the angle and the timing of the punch and all those different things. And so to me, it's like he seems to be kind of on an exponential growth curve. So if in 13 days from now, where's he going to be at? Because he's just getting better and better and better and better. And that's, again, where I kind of wonder about the George Fant signing also. Is it just as kind of a Band-Aid or a stopgap, just in case you feel like Connerly's not ready? You've got a guy with a lot of experience who can come in and play for you. So that's where I'm getting kind of mixed signals, I guess, from the signing, from his trajectory. Where is he actually at? And I think the great thing, to your point, is Wiley can play. There's no doubt about it. He can come in and hold down the fort for you if you want. He can also do a great job at guard. So the other name on here that I have in red that I didn't read off earlier was Dieter. To your point, like, does Dieter, who I think has had a better offseason this year than last year, has he kind of warranted saying, hey, man, we really want Allegretti to start at right guard, hypothetically, and he could be the swing piece inside. So I think that's where, like, I got those 3 names in red: Dieter, George Fant, Trent Scott, and I really think they're all kind of fighting for that 9th, 10th spot, assuming Cosme goes to PUP. And again, the signing of George Fant is so interesting to me, because is it because you're not happy with Connerly, or not that you're not happy, or maybe you don't think he's quite ready? That's probably a better way to word that. And he's going to kind of hold down the fort for a little bit, and Wiley plays guard. So that's where I'm kind of curious to see the decision they make with these 3.
Connerly would get my superlative for most improved player from day 1 of camp. Like the first couple days, I don't remember if I went up to you on the sideline or not, but I remember thinking, I'm a little bit surprised by how he looks. I just thought he would have started camp faster, like even just his movement stuff. But then right away in the New England, I wasn't there for the joint practices, you were, so you could tell me how that went. But in that preseason game, 14 dropbacks, only 1 pressure, run grade from PFF was almost 80. And those things kind of matched what I saw when I watched, which was like, oh my God, he's doing really good stuff. And it continued, right? So I feel pretty confident now. I feel good. It's silly to say this, but if it wasn't the Giants, if it was a better matchup, maybe even I'd be thrilled. But I almost, it's not like I want to protect him or not debut the pitcher against the awesome lineup or something. But I do in the back of my head feel like if you can get a couple weeks into the season before you have him go out there for 74 snaps for this team that runs more no huddle than any offense in the league last year since Chip Kelly was in Philly playing against you. You know, that was the most tempo in the National Football League. Like, I believe in Connerly. By the way, 2 sacks allowed his entire college career. Like, he's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, he's going to be really good. I think I kind of feel what you're talking about is I think he's getting a lot better. And I just think it's also important to remember he's switching sides. Like, he played predominantly left tackle at Oregon. And again, when he does practice on the left side, you see a much more confident pass set. You see much more confident hands. And I see what you're talking about on the right side. The hands are just a touch looser than you like. The angles may be a touch tighter than you like. And he's an athlete. He's able to recover it. But in the back of your mind, you're like, man, maybe he settles in even more. And then all of a sudden, week 2 or week 3, it's like,
well, think about the difference in the last 2 weeks. Like, what is that 3 weeks from now?
That's what I'm saying. In 13 days, maybe he looks completely different. Because again, he does some stuff in that New England game, and I put it on the Twitter, like a couple of plays that I liked, where he's doing big boy, high level, high athlete NFL stuff. So again, that's the hard thing to read about this is maybe that arc just keeps going up and up and up, and all of a sudden you come in week 1 and he's just ready to go because he played Abdul Carter in college, and that was one of his best games in my opinion. So I don't think there's anything to be afraid of there if you think he's ready from a technical standpoint, if you think he's ready from a mental standpoint, because again, that offense at Oregon was very different. They didn't really huddle. There's not a lot of there's no huddle communication. The pass coverage. I actually coached a guy this offseason who went to Oregon, so we got to kind of talk through some of their offense. Very, very different. So maybe you're just like, just let him sit for another couple weeks, and then all of a sudden he's ready to rock and roll. Because I think he's close. I just don't know how close he actually is, and some of that stuff that we can never know because we're not in the meeting room.
Logan Paulsen NFL is the Twitter account where he was posting some of those videos, by the way. That's Logan's new social account. You should go check him out. He sits in very dark rooms and crunches tape and eats, I was going to say goldfish, but everyone would know that's a lie, eats kale. But you should go check out his feed. You're crushing it on the tape. The more of that you do,
thanks.
The better. That's been a lot of fun. Put a pin in this because we got to keep moving on other things and not keep nerding out on this. But I do want to talk to you about just the idea of rotating linemen, like possession by possession, because I actually had a really enlightening conversation with Brandon Coleman about last year, and he actually felt like it kind of hindered him some in a sense because he couldn't get into a rhythm and basically play by play. It felt like in the same way that a defender sets you up, like you're kind of playing a chess game, and he struggled with it a little bit from what he told me, but I want to tackle that another time with you, maybe as we get closer to the season, if that's what they're planning on. Wide receiver. There's 5 locks here, in my opinion. Do you disagree with that?
I think we see it exactly the same way. I got Terry McLaurin, Noah Brown, Deebo Samuel, Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane.
Yep. So there you go. So then the question becomes, did anybody else of the rest of the group separate themselves enough that you say, I got to keep them if you want to keep a 6th? Is it possible that they just go grab a 6th from outside the building that they like, that they've had their eyes on? They've got a list of guys that they've been monitoring and watching tape on from the preseason. Do they need a 6th the way they operate their offense, especially if they roll with 4 tight ends and some of the things that they like to do? So go wherever you want there.
Yeah, this is one of those ones, you hear about the final roster. I think we were just talking about this. The final roster is not going to be announced till Wednesday. And this feels like the room that they may be talking to, right? Because right now I have KJ Osborne as the 6th guy. But I like KJ. I think he's done a good job this offseason. And again, like we talked about, I don't want to talk about someone losing their job so flippantly, right? Because again, but I know this is a tough league. This is a tough spot to make it. And so it's one of those ones where it feels like no one, and we talked about it. I talked about it every preseason game, talked about it with you a bunch on the phone. I feel like nobody really separated themselves. And every year that I've been here, someone has stepped up and kind of said, I definitively deserve this 6th spot. And when that doesn't happen, to me, that makes me a little bit unsettled. And I kind of say to myself, we need to find somebody else to fill this role.
Let me give an example really quick. Like the Mitchell Tinsley performance for Cincinnati, which, by the way, he did here in the past. He wasn't mossing people in the back of the end zone, but he had some of those games where it was like he got kept on the active roster as the last guy because he went out and said, you're not cutting me. And I didn't see a "you're not cutting me" August from anybody, really.
And some of that could be because of the quarterback performances, but I went back and watched the Sam Hartman film, and this is going to get a lot of people pissed off. But I'm okay saying it, is when you watch the Sam Hartman tape, some of that's him, I think the ball is always relatively going to the right spot. I think on the interception, they totally, especially the first one, like where the interception pick 6, he got fooled by the coverage a little bit. They were in man a lot on the drive before. They rolled a cover 3. Mistakes happen. I get it. He's a young player. But there's some of those where I'm like, this receiver is not running this route the way it needs to be run to the standard of an NFL player. And I'm not going to shout that guy out here, but I kind of was like, that's going to make him look worse. So I think there was kind of a mix of poor quarterback play, or lacking quarterback play at times, lacking receiver play at times. Because again, it's a young receiver group outside of a couple veterans. And so I think it was kind of this weird mix of no receiver really stepping up, the quarterback struggling at times also, and kind of this weird amalgamation of just lackluster play. And no one was able to differentiate themselves. So that's where it's like, I jokingly said to Fred Smoot on one of the podcasts we did, like, is Mitchell Tinsley the 6th receiver? And what I mean by that is this dude just on a different team in the NFL, because that's kind of what it feels like right now to me.
I think if I had to bet 3 possible outcomes, they keep a 6th guy that's here, they only keep 5, or there's a 6th guy that's not here yet, I would take C, right? That would be my guess. Is it possible that they only keep 5 and they actually keep another guy at a different spot? Like, we haven't gotten a tight end, but do you have 4?
I have 4.
Okay. Yeah. As do I, because that means you have Yankoff on the roster. I don't know if that factors in for you in any way, but you've presumably got 4 running backs, 4 tight ends. They run a lot of 11 personnel, which is 3 receivers. Is there a path to 5 wideouts in your opinion, and not a 6th guy? If that 6th guy is either not dressing or not playing teams necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think so, man. I think the more I think about it, you mentioned the tempo stuff. I think you just need bodies for this. I don't think there was a game last week they didn't have, or last year they didn't have at least 6 guys up. If I'm remembering correctly, right?
It sounds right, because they just run so many plays. Like, guys get gassed, and especially we don't know what kind of shape. I mean, he's going to be in great shape, but football shape. Week 1, Terry's in. Then you got a short week into week 2. Noah Brown didn't get to do a lot in the last few weeks either. Like, you just made me think about this. Like, that's your top 2 guys with Debo. And like maybe those guys are chasing their tail a little bit here over the next 2 weeks. So, yeah, I think I just talked myself out of the idea of 5. You probably just need a body.
Yeah, just need somebody that you feel comfortable with and you can trust. And I think about how they signed Noah Brown last year on the cut day, and what a tremendous addition he was. So, again, I think that speaks to Adam Peters' talent and how his staff is working to kind of always find the best version of this roster. Think back to last year, how fastidious and detailed they were about cultivating a practice squad that had people that could play football for you. And so I think that's what they're going to do, is find someone to fill that role. And I think hopefully KJ Osborne's on the practice squad and he's here and he's part of the organization. But that feels like a position where there might be a little bit of movement heading from Tuesday to Wednesday.
All right, so tight end you had 4, which means Ertz, Bates, Sinnott, Coulson, Yankoff. Yep. Running back, any surprises, or do you go 4 with Eckler, Krosky, Merritt, Rodriguez, McNichols?
Those are my 4. I did have Jeremy McNichols in red, just as a guy that could be in a flex spot. And I think this also applies to Chris Rodriguez. Anybody you feel like you could maybe get to practice squad, because I don't feel like you could get Bill Krosky Merritt to practice squad. And obviously you couldn't get Austin Eckler to practice squad. But Chris Rodriguez or Jeremy McNichols, and again, they both have had really good preseasons. So this is just kind of the nature of the running back. But if there's a stud, or you need to keep an extra offensive lineman, this feels like a position where it might be in flex. Like I think a lot of people are like, why not tight end? Why not Coulson Yankoff? Coulson Yankoff was a maniac on teams and had one of the most explosive plays for the preseason. I don't feel like that's a guy you want to risk losing. I wonder about those other 2 running backs, just because the running back ecosystem of the NFL is so saturated.
So the Rodriguez one, that makes headlines to me. Like, you want to talk about people going, what? I mean,
and again, I don't think so, but I'm just saying, depending on how they view him, like long term. And again,
can you risk that after, like, if he's the closest thing you have to B-Rob now, like you've traded B-Rob. I understand Krosky Merritt eventually might get the most carries, but like week 1, goal line, short yardage, he's the guy on the field. Can you risk it?
I think so. Maybe this is, again, like, probably not is what I'm going to say, but in terms of, probably not, because he played really well in the Cincinnati game, and I also thought he played great against Baltimore. So I think he's just set himself up to be like, I deserve to be on the 53 irrespective. But I just wanted to highlight that just because of how they treated him last year in terms of up and down, potential cut. Again, like, he looks in great shape. He's done everything awesome. I have 4. I just as a position that could have some flexibility to it, I just wanted to point that out.
All right, last one really quick on offense. Quarterback. You've got Jaden Daniels in. So that means you're going to have
surprise.
You're going to be right there. Any chance they go 2? I've seen a lot of people only keep 2, but with the Mariota Achilles thing, I can't do that. I've got to have Johnson on my 53.
So to me, this is where, have I called Jeff Driscoll's agent to see if he's available and healthy for this season? Because I'm giving him a call. I'm looking at every single backup quarterback and being like, what's available. I'm calling every veteran. I'm uncovering every rock. That's not to say that Josh Johnson shouldn't be on the practice squad or Sam Hartman should be on the practice squad. But if I am going to carry 3 on game day, I need to have confidence they can win us a game. And right now, unfortunately, I think Sam's still coming back from that shoulder. Obviously, Josh Johnson in a relatively new offense didn't look, I don't think, his best. I think you're probably saying, is there someone else that we have experience with that we could get in here? So I just think Jeff Driscoll, he looked great in the preseason last year. He was here the whole year. I don't think he's with the team at the moment. So going to give him a ring, see how he's feeling, see if he wants to come out and play some football, and probably call some other guys if I'm going to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster.
But of the guys they have now, you're kind of looking at 2 then, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, let's do defense next. I think it's maybe less interesting, frankly, but there are a couple of fascinating spots, including a really, really busy back of the D-line that you and I have been zeroing in on for a week or so. And I thought one particular linebacker really helped himself again in the final preseason game. We'll get to that next on Take Command as Logan Paulsen forms his 53. Take Command, Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen, ahead of forming the 53 officially. The Commanders are working on that over in Ashburn. Logan is crunching some of the tough decisions for us and taking us through the thought process that might be going on right now at the facility. So let's start on the defensive line, right at the back end here. There are bubble players that are interesting, and this to me is the area where they're going to cut the most guys that might play on other teams. Like there are veterans that may not make this thing. How did you go about putting your D-line together?
Yeah, this was really tough, and I was talking to Bram. He and I had a show we were doing today, and we were kind of walking through the different decisions with, obviously regards to this defensive line. And you get to like a little bit of depth here, and you're kind of like, I don't know what to do. And so obviously you got your Dorrance, your Duran, your Javon, your Von Miller, your Dietrich Wise. Those guys feel like locks. You want to keep 2 defensive tackles. I would say Jerzon, probably because he was a 2nd-round pick last year. And then for that 4th defensive tackle spot, Grant, I think this is where it gets a little bit interesting. It's like Carl Davis, Goldman, and then there's one other, Sheldon Day. Those are the 3. And I think Sheldon Day's had a pretty good preseason. I think Carl Davis has actually popped a little bit. And then Goldman, I was a little bit generally disappointed with. I thought, there were some things he did well, some things he did poorly. But I think those are the 3. And so it kind of just depends on what you want to get out of that group. And so I ended up saying Carl Davis, but to me, it's like flip a coin. Who could you get to practice squad? And maybe that's another spot of the roster that kind of has some fluctuation to it heading into Wednesday.
One thing we talked about going into the final preseason game was how will they prioritize scheme in terms of, do you keep someone who's a little bit more helpful against the run, which seemed to be the offseason priority with the money spent on Kinlaw, with the size of Goldman and Dietrich Wise and some of those guys? Or do you just go with the old axiom of like, can you rush the quarterback? Then we'll find a place for you. I mean, what did you settle on there in terms of who you kept and who you didn't?
I just felt like you wanted to kind of present different things for the offensive line to deal with. Like I think Kinlaw and Payne are both good at both. Not great at both, but good at both. And so I think you feel pretty good about them in pass rushing situations and on 1st and 2nd down. Then I like the developmental idea of Jerzon Newton. And then I said, well, what kind of body type don't you have? And it's the Goldman and Carl Davis. And as much as I think I like Sheldon Day, I think he did a great job. I think he's a guy you can get to practice squad, and I think he's going to help you, and I think he'll play football games for you this year. But I think he's a guy that no one's going to like rush to the waiver wire to sign. So I hope he's around because I think he's a hell of a ball player. But to me, this is a really tough decision just in terms of, and I think this kind of feels something we talked about last show is like some of that soft stuff. How are you in the room? How are you as a worker? How are you in terms of developing your skill set? Are you a Dan Quinn guy? I think that's going to really inform this decision here with that fourth D tackle spot.
One of the things I've been interested about is there somewhere where like they go young and we're not maybe expecting it, but because they have, I think it's 25 guys 30 or older on this roster. They either signed or traded for 20 players that are 29 or older this year. They're turning 30 in season. And that was the case last year, right? And it worked out beautifully. But I wonder about like DN with someone like a Cleveland Farrell or a Javonte Jean-Baptiste, or is there anywhere where they go with an upside play potentially where they feel like they could have a little bit of more youth in the room? With the practice squad as big as it is, do you feel like you could just keep those guys in the building anyway and have your cake and eat it too? Or what's your thought there?
I think you can, but I do think the way that the staff, kind of talks about Javonte Jean-Baptiste, the way that, Dan says, I'm so excited to see him play, and rightfully so. He did a lot of good things last year, but I have him making the 53. I have Jacob Martin making the 53, and then it kind of is a surprise, I have Jalen Holmes making the 53. So obviously Cleveland Farrell, who I love his leadership, I love his competitiveness, and I think he's a pro's pro in terms of preparation, doesn't make the 53, but it feels like you can get some of his skill set, if not all of his skill set, with a combination of those three guys I just mentioned. The pass rush of Jacob Martin, I think the upside of Jean-Baptiste, and I think Jalen Holmes is a sneaky one to me because I've seen him play 3 technique, I've seen him play 5 technique, I've seen him play the stand-up defensive end. So does that allow you to save a defensive tackle spot and maybe invest more roster positions at a different spot? I have 10 defensive linemen right now, but he's a guy to keep an eye on in terms of like, can he take 2 spots because of his body type?
That would make Farrell maybe their most notable player so far that you don't have making the team. He'd be a guy to me that not only will get scooped and play somewhere where they have less depth than Washington, obviously,
right,
but like I also wonder, just seeing the litany of trades over the last week. Last year, remember, they were able to trade. It was John Ridgeway, I think, to New Orleans. There were a couple trades they made where Adam Peters he's a phone worker, man. That guy works in the shadows. And the NFL's changing. When I covered the league and you were playing, there weren't really that many trades. It was not like basketball or baseball. And that, as these younger GMs have taken over, the game has changed. So I don't know if a guy like Farrell nets you something, but there were guys like him that were traded this week for late round picks. I'd just be curious. Not necessarily just him, but is there something maybe with somebody that we haven't thought about? Ridgeway last year is a good example where there's a bubble guy and they're able to do a pick swap, which Adam Peters seems to like doing, or figure something out in that way. Let's go to linebacker real quick, Logan. I wanted to hit on linebacker before we end the pod, though, because frankly, I just have a man crush right now on Ale Cajo, and I wanted to make sure that his name got mentioned because I thought he deserved it after the way he played the preseason finale against Baltimore and really the entire August. But what are you looking at there where you've got Wagner in clearly with Luvu? Belor's special teams animal is going to be an ace. He's around, so you count him. McGee is now healthy, who will be in. You got to keep Kane Medrano, both because he's earned it and he's going to help on teams, but who knows? He could play on defense. Is that it? Is it the 5 there? And then did anybody else stand out to you?
This was tough for me, and I'd put Nick Belor in with the specialist as like the 4th specialist because I think that's where his like home's going to be. So I'm going to keep 5 pure linebackers. And I don't know, man, like after watching Ale Cajo, you said man crush. I think that's a great way to describe it. Like he plays in a very traditional way at the position. Downhill, super square, firm tackler, takes on blocks. All of those kind of fundamental linebacker things you want to see. He almost has an interception in the Baltimore game. And I look at that and I say to myself, that feel, we talked about with the receivers, like someone putting their stamp on a preseason process. I felt like he put his stamp on this thing. Like he was a guy that wasn't getting any reps at the beginning of the offseason, right? He just wasn't getting any, OTAs, minicamp, kind of just there, felt like a body. And then talk about just an exponential growth curve in terms of improving himself and making a name for himself on the roster. Like he's the guy. So Ale Cajo feels like the guy that's going to make the 53 as a little bit of a surprise. And again, I think Duke Riley had a really solid preseason as well, but he feels like a guy you can get to practice squad given he was on the street, 2 weeks ago. So to me, I have Kane, I have Cajo, Jordan McGee, Bobby Wagner, and Frankie Luvu. And like you said, I think they all do it a little bit different way. Like Kane is this kind of lithe athlete. He had this great play where he ran down a screen. It was an awesome job by him. But Cajo, man, if you like linebacker play and you are of a certain age, like I am, I don't know how that dude doesn't make the team. Maybe you say, oh, he doesn't cover well, but shoot, man, it's too visceral for me as good linebacker play. I can't have him not on the roster.
So it's so funny. Maybe it's like a generational thing, but you just said it beautifully. Like, I watch him and it's a different era. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's read and react. The other thing I kept thinking to myself when I was doing my own 53 exercise is, like, Joe Witt's voice was in my head talking about the way we play is not for everybody, and he's talking about, like, arrive violently. Like, you know who arrived violently all August long? It's that Jeremy Reeves heat-seeking missile in space. Like, Ale Cajo is at full speed before the ball's into the flat, and he's blowing dudes up. And the size, like, you feel him. It's 6'2", 235. But I didn't realize he's a 4'5", 40 guy. Like, he can move too. You're going to keep him in the building regardless. So maybe it doesn't matter in the end. But that's a guy I'd like to be able to stand in front of everybody if I'm Dan Quinn and kind of preach this idea of, like, meritocracy and things mattering and being like, and our final guy is, and you just put on the tape of his preseason and let everybody watch it,
Yeah. And again, former 5-star recruit, Alabama transferred to UCLA. Like, you see that skill set. And it got to a point, honestly, when I was doing the 53, where I was like, do you try to get Kane to practice squad? Like, I had that thought because that's how good he played. And then you go back and watch the games and you say, oh, they're playing it a little bit differently. They're approaching this differently. The physicality is a little bit different. The way they get the job done is different. So for the first time in a long time, I think they keep 5. And I think all those guys deserve to be on the roster, which is pretty cool. And again, then safety and cornerback feel incredibly set. Like, it feels like it's been set for weeks now. But that linebacker room is going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out.
Nothing particularly interesting, I don't think, just looking over what you had for the DBs. But I guess as a final thought, anything to monitor there, do you think?
I mean, doesn't this feel like the most deep, secure group of everybody? Mike Sanders.
How much better is their corner room than a year ago? Like, the growth is amazing.
So much better. And I think Joe Witt Jr. said in his presser, it's 2 guys from last year, all new people. And the guys that they brought in, obviously Mike Sanders still they developed in-house. Marshawn Lattimore looks to be in great shape. Trey Amos, bro, has had a tremendous offseason.
Yep.
Just looks the part. The ball skills are awesome. Jonathan Jones, the veteran experience. Noah Igbenogany has also had an awesome preseason. Harris, fantastic. Quan, fantastic. Percy jumps out. Reeves, you mentioned the missile. And Tyler Owens, there just aren't that many people on the planet Earth that move, hit, and cover the way he can. They're going to find a role for him on this team. So as maybe like a sneaky practice squad signing, we mentioned Ben Nickel, and I think McDaniel probably ends up making it the practice squad. Both those guys feel like upside plays to me, but those are practice squad guys. I think the 53 guys are the ones we just mentioned.
There you go. Take Command's forming of the 53 with Logan Paulsen. Some of the really important decisions going to be made out in Ashburn. As a reminder, make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube on Take Command or via audio, Spotify, Apple, the Odyssey app, wherever you're getting this, because we drop new episodes, new installments in multiple times a week. The next time you hear from us will be after the roster is formed with a breakdown on some of the decisions Washington made. And who knows, maybe some new faces coming into the organization as well that we can talk about. Check us out on YouTube on 106.7 The Fan or the Team 980 as well, and listen wherever you get your audio. For Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen saying thanks for watching us, listening to us on Take Command.